Greetings, greetings, greetings. You are now tuned into the vault. Trust Christian, own nothing, control everything. Always appreciate everybody for tuning in live, listening to replay. Definitely always appreciate that. So thank you for tuning in live, listening to replay. This is Trust Christian in the Vault, episode 317, Worker Mentality versus Entrepreneur. Always appreciate everybody for tuning in live, listening to replay. Gonna go ahead and get into our episode here today. Uh, where we're going in. Always appreciate everybody for tuning in live, listening to replay. This is a Tuesday episode, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Appreciate Mississippi for tuning in live, listening to replay. Shout out to Mississippi. Appreciate you for tuning in live, listening to replay. Once again, this is the VO episode 317, Worker Mentality versus Entrepreneur. Very important episode because we have so many trustees that are contacting the VO, have contacted the VO for years, and have looked to make the transition. And so we're going to discuss what that transition looks like today for trustees that are having to manage their family estate, that are making a transition from the public to the private, that are making a transition, but they have to understand the difference in mentality. There's a difference in mentality between the worker that has the job, and there's the difference between the entrepreneur. And so we're just going to continue to uh, go over the basics. We want to do a sound check for everybody tuning in live, listening to replay. If you can hear us live, feel free to type into the chat that you can hear us live. Once again, if you're tuning in live, feel free to type into the chat that you can hear us live. But once again, worker mentality versus entrepreneur, the recording, the update. So let's go over it, ladies and gentlemen. Worker mentality versus entrepreneur mentality. Trustees say, oh, I don't know trusteeship. I don't know entrepreneurship. I work. So what's the first thing I can do? We'll go ahead and share the first book you can read in entrepreneurship as an entrepreneur. It's pretty much on Harvard's business books to read. Has been on there since like the 80s. And so we're going to go ahead and tell you it's called The Entrepreneur's Myth. It's called the E Myth. Uh, so once again, the E Myth is by Michael Gerber. This is a world-renowned book. Once again, it's called The Entrepreneur's Myth or the E Myth. Of course, the book has been revised. May not be wise to get the revised versions, but you might want to get the original. And when you get the original, you'll see that there are things in there that are hard nails and hammer to the situation of business. And so, people talk about the types of people. We're not going into it. We're just letting you know where you can start. That's the first book. So after you read the first book, you can contact the vault. You know that if you want the consultation to move forward, it'll be Christian at trustchristian.com. Whether you even want to move forward with trustee training past the worker mentality to the entrepreneur mentality. Because you gotta have the entrepreneur mentality as a trustee and trusteeship because you're having to think about taking risk. You're thinking about being a fiduciary. Whereas the worker mentality says you can fall back. Take almost a coddling. Take almost a second hand if it's ever provided. Well, we never say or are against help, but we're talking about the 2 week paycheck mentality. That's a difference. When you come into the entrepreneur world, you're really an investor. You're investing. You're planting seeds. You're growing relationships. That's what's going on as an entrepreneur. You're growing knowledge base. What does a worker do? Stay in the same position until they advance past that position, either through work or someone moving out of the spot they want, possibly because they learned something. But the worker was trained to learn one specific or two or a specific thing, whereas the entrepreneur can learn many things. The entrepreneur can learn many things. They can learn many things and do many things because they're made at a point to be versatile. The worker mentality, it puts us in a rut. It puts us in a position to where we would only be focused on one thing, as they say, which we shouldn't be. As an entrepreneur, to be a serial entrepreneur, obviously you have multiple business ventures. So when people talk about having an LLC, that's a holding company of multiple companies, that's because they have multiple ideas. Asset protection comes from asset separation. So when we talk to the worker mentality, the only asset in the worker mentality is what? Them working. The only asset in the worker mentality is what they can produce and give away. Whereas the entrepreneur never owned it. The investor never owned it. They just gained control of assets, assets under management. How many assets did they get under management? They're focused on growing assets. They're not focused on working for money. Why? Because the businesses can operate independent of them. They're assets. They're going to work without them. That's an asset. It's going to grow without them. That's an asset. The worker mentality says we got to continue to get it. We never know when we're not going to get it. We don't have any deadlines. We don't have any time frames. The entrepreneur says we have time frames. We have deadlines on when we are going to achieve our goals in first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. What are our third quarter numbers? What are our fourth quarter numbers? What are our estimated earnings? These are things that the entrepreneur is thinking about. What is our projected earnings? They can at least do 90 days. They can't do the whole year, but they can do 90 days sometimes. They can do 30 days. They can say, look, in the next 30 days, we should be able to make this much money in a company. An investor should be able to say, this is how much we're going to take this account to and grow it. That's the job of an entrepreneur. Is to take what resources they have and grow them. The worker is to be put in place. It's to do a job. So how do we break these so-called thought processes? Well, we have to become perpetual learners. And then we have to be perpetual doers. We have to be perpetual risk takers. The entrepreneur may have 4 to 5 ventures that fail this year. Are you willing to fail 4 to 5 times even when you had 10 businesses? So maybe 4 to 5 didn't work, but 6 did. 5 did. Entrepreneur mentality. Whereas the worker says, why start the business if it's not going to grow to where I know it's a guarantee? Guarantees. Businesses pivot and evolve. Worker mentality. Worker mentality wants it right now in this generation. The entrepreneur mentality says, I'm building something for generations. The worker mentality says, we got to get it, we got to work, we got it in our first generation, this generation. We got to enjoy some glory. An entrepreneur says, I'll pass along the glory to my kids. I'll pass along the glory to generations. Because I'm an entrepreneur. We're the people that take resources and develop them for generations to come. Not just resources now, but forever. Right. Worker mentality. Looking at the news, watching the news. Entrepreneurs, true entrepreneurs don't watch the news. We were sitting in a room with entrepreneurs in the past month. All of them pretty much said that they don't have a TV in their bedroom for the most part. Most of them said that they don't watch traditional TV. So, business deals are getting done at the Cigar Lounge, just to let you all know. We would like to think some business deals are getting done at the Hookah Lounge. But business deals are getting done at Starbucks, if they're open. Worker mentality says it's location based. Entrepreneur says we have to be diversified in our portfolio. Worker mentality says I'm closing off my options. We just got out of the pandemic. We are in a booming time. The worker mentality says things are starting to pick up. The entrepreneur mentality says things have been booming since June of last year. All the indicators have said it. We're here now. Last year was what they call a black swan event. It was those things that supposedly randomly happen. So we're back at it now. We're back in full swing and motion in the States, getting there to the States, opening it up, opening it up, opening it up. And business is back going to who? The entrepreneurs who stood in front of the wave before it came. And now they're surfing it. The worker mentality may still be waiting for a check from the government. Worker mentality. Thinking that they can outwork the money. Are you terrified to try to outwork money? How can you outwork money? It's pieces of paper that can be taller than you, be way more than you. Hmm. Worker mentality. Not trying to build a team, trying to do it all by yourself. Remember, someone important used to say, if you want something done right, do it yourself. That's a worker mentality. Entrepreneurs say, find the best people to make your job easier and make theirs easy. And when you think about even making it easy, it's not easy in the sense of completely easy. It'd be unfortunate if somebody misjudged those words when we say that it's easy. It's not easy. Entrepreneurship is not easy. It's not made for the weak. You don't know when the check is coming. People who live off royalties in certain industries, royalties. But let's go there with the entrepreneur, the one that's not completely living off the royalties, even though an artist is an entrepreneur. But let's talk about that. How do you live off being an entrepreneur? We were talking to a senior. And I mean, this is not like old news. I mean, new news. It's old news that most businesses aren't profitable in the first 5 years, and most of them fail. But the ones that stay alive, that you don't see most CEOs at those times, and even in the public side with going IPO, even if they're not going IPO before the first 5 years of its existence, you really don't see a lot of them taking salaries. They just benefit maybe from a company vehicle, a company headquarters where they have an office at, where the office may have a bed, the office may have a bathroom, the office may have a coffee table for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The office is going to have a traditional business table. The office is going to be rather big because these are things that the entrepreneurs are building into their lifestyle that make work not work anymore. So it got back to being fun when an entrepreneur can do multiple ventures at one time and be in multiple places at one time, whether that's through royalty, whether that's through product, whether that's through service, whether that's through what do we want to say? Through information, through technology, any of these different forms. So the worker mentality. Do they have such a diverse mentality? We talk about diversifying your portfolio, but we talk to so many entrepreneurs. How are you a successful investor and you don't diversify your portfolio? That is how you hedge against each position. It's almost like you're tranching yourself into positions to where even your worst position right now can go back against you and you could be profitable. And as well, even your best position, you can cut with profits before you lose everything that you gained. Worker mentality. Hmm. Worker mentality doesn't have a true family oriented sense of mentality. Entrepreneur has family on mind. And thinking about their last name, not their first name. We live in that kind of world where you think about your last name. Oh, that's that kid. That person's kid. Oh, that's that person's family. Oh, that's that important name. We're in that age. Names. We're in the age of last names. The worker mentality versus the entrepreneur mentality. The worker mentality is playing not to lose. The entrepreneur is playing only to win. They're betting it all on the line. Every day is an all-in game mood. Worker mentality. I don't know if I feel like going there. There's a possibility I could call out. Think about how the entrepreneur says, I never think about calling out. What is there to call out from? The life that you built. Worker mentality is completely different. I got to get in the habit, Trust Christian. I got to get in the habit of doing these things. Hmm. Yeah. And this is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. Worker mentality versus entrepreneur mentality. Where did you get your education from? Did you get it from public school? Did you get it from college? Did you get it from private school? Hey, someone actually typed an interesting question in the chat here. If you feel free, you can feel free to type any question into the chat related to the topic. Question was is what about the wealthy strategic alliances and different families taking the same last name to unify and dominate? And this is once again goes back to where we talked to the trustees about people in trust deal with people in trust. This is why the vault has private trustee training, is because it's for the families to come together that work together through the private trustees. And of course families are vetted. But at the end of the day, you got to build a private community. That's what we had to do. Everybody that's listening online, they needed that community. They needed that shelter to come to. They needed to say, I got to do what someone just typed into the chat typed. Because you got to work with other people and trust. This isn't an island. This isn't no man's land. It's multiple families owning an island, owning a land. That's what's going on. But how many people are thinking like that? Having, those things. So the game is easy for the elite. Why? Because they're already doing it. See, they're practicing entrepreneur mentality. They're practicing a long mentality, long game, challenging thought process. See, do you see the advantage? Do you see the disadvantage? The disadvantage is that you're preoccupied for thinking for yourself. The mentors would say this isn't for everybody. But the mentors know what we're talking about. Because they made sure we thought for ourselves. They didn't give us the answers. See, worker mentality, they want the answers. Entrepreneurs, they're going to find the solutions themselves with the team. It's a different mentality. But we had to do this episode because so many people requested the worker mentality versus the entrepreneur. Which one are you? Christian at trustchristian.com if you want to get a consultation. Christian at trustchristian.com. Definitely appreciate everybody for tuning in live, listening to replay. This is worker mentality versus entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are focused on acquiring assets. Entrepreneurs are focused on being in the correct position to take advantage of wealth. Their whole goal is to acquire assets under management. That's their goal. Their ultimate goal, they may have a big number, that's what they're looking to have, assets under management. Because assets under management equal fees. Banks get paid off of fees. Institutions get paid off of fees. For companies holding money there, for individuals holding money there, it's a business. Fees. So the worker mentality. Worker mentality may not know that. Entrepreneur mentality. They're focused. We were talking to someone, and you guys can Google this guy named Damon John. And somebody asked him, they said, so what's the difference between the millionaires and the billionaires? Here's what he says. He's supposedly a billionaire on paper from managing a clothing company, industrial company. Pretty much they make clothing, but we would almost say like a textile, but more than that, they're more of like a manufacturing processor, not just in the area. He has multiple distribution centers under his control, very large distribution centers for clothing and things of that nature. So when we talk about the worker mentality, he says the difference between the millionaires and the billionaires, he says, is the fact that the billionaires study to learn how to minimize their tax liability. He said that's the main thing that they read about. And it was interesting to see that, somebody that says they're in that category themselves, for someone to say that they are of the caliber on paper, for them to say, oh, that's the difference, is the study of minimizing liability. It's interesting to see that. And that's why, if it's so interesting, we can see the difference between the mentalities too. Because the entrepreneur is definitely at higher levels thinking about that. Worker mentality versus entrepreneur. Entrepreneur says come early, stay late. Appreciate everybody for tuning in live, listening to replay. Christian at trustchristian.com. We have open trustee training. We've already pretty much picked our second day for this year for our trustee training workshop. Feel free to email over to the vault to get that information. Christian at trustchristian.com. Once again, that's Christian at trustchristian.com. And we'll definitely be going forward from there. Feel free to email over. Peace.